Welcome to the final part of Mega Turrican on the Sega Genesis, or Sega Mega Drive depending on what region of the world you're from, which is probably all of them outside of the US and Canada, and probably Mexico too. I think Mexico calls it Sega Genesis as well, but I'm not really sure. And in all honesty, I don't even know if the Sega Genesis was even that popular in the Mexican regions. I think it was all Super Nintendo. But never mind that. Here's the second to last world in the game, and if you played the Super Turrican version, this is where the game pretty much ended. The stages here are pretty much the same as the Super Nintendo counterparts, save for a couple of differences. And yes, the train scene is here from the Super Nintendo game, but it's somewhat better in this one. And as you can tell, the soundtrack is a bit more foreboding and very Genesis sounding, for lack of a better term. They still got the clear sounding drum kits. I love this game's use of the drums. It is very, very... I don't know how to explain it, it's just so epic. I don't know, it just reminds me of, and I said this in the Super Turrican playthrough, but the music here, as well as the atmosphere, it reminds me of the Alien movies. Like the first two Alien movies, Alien and Aliens. The music that's playing in the background right now sounds like James Horner's score for the second Alien movie, but if you put it onto a Sega Genesis. And there was a Sega Genesis Alien game, Alien 3, but that soundtrack was completely different from what you expect. Still really good and catchy, it's just that it sounds too funky for an Alien game. But yeah, in this stage you have these giant flying enemies that take a lot of bullets to kill. And they also fly into you a lot too. There are also a bunch of secret pathways to discover and goodies to obtain, and also the time limit I noticed is way more lenient than I thought it would be. Definitely way more lenient than the Super Nintendo game. Or to be honest, any other Turrican game released before and after this one. I have to say right now, Mega Turrican is probably the most beginner-friendly Turrican game. You have a decent amount of hits you can take before you die in this game, and you have plenty of invincibility frames before you get hit again. So, unlike Turrican 1 and 2, where I swear, if an enemy touches you for too long, you just die instantly. And also, the jumps here aren't as strenuous as they were in Super Turrican. And comparing this game to Super Turrican 2, both games are very linear, even though Super Turrican 2 is even more linear. But in Super Turrican 2, it added vehicle stages. And not all of them are hard, but there's one in a later stage where you're underwater, and I swear, that stage kind of messes with my eyes a bit. There are no such stages in this game, it's just straightforward, side-scrolling action. And yeah, this was actually the first Turrican game I played. I grew up with this one. I did not have a Super Nintendo growing up. My cousins had it, so I had to go over to their house if I wanted to play a Super Nintendo game. And I'm not sure if anybody in America even owned an Amiga, so the first two Turricans are out of the picture for me to play those. And even then, by that time, would an Amiga even work in like 2003, 2004? Because those consoles they're computers, so I would imagine they would break down at some point. Unless you take care of them, but then again, NES's break down after 5 years if you don't take care of them, so what would happen to an Amiga after 5 years? But that is the mystery of life. I'm just glad that my Sega Genesis is still working after 30 years and my Nintendo 64 is still kicking after 20. That is amazing. I still had to go through like 3 PS2s, I don't get it. As technology advances, shit breaks down easier. But no matter. Can you die, please? There we go. Those flying creatures take a lot of bullets. Here are the mouth things on the floor, and they're even more annoying in this game because they shoot out way more bullets at you than in the Super Nintendo version. Alright, here's the Runaway Train, Mega Drive Edition. Everything you expect from Super Turrican is here, except the platforming here is a bit more streamlined. It's not as complicated, or you don't have the... Oh shit, I said that completely wrong. You're not going to worry about falling through the platform even though it looks like you jumped on it. There are a bit more enemies in quantity here, which is a kind of a pain in the ass, but the platforming here is way more fair. You can see the platforms floating by scroll at a very Sonic & Knuckles-esque manner. Again, with the Sonic & Knuckles reference. But yeah, in Sonic & Knuckles, the first boss with Robotnik had these trees with spike balls attached to them. And you had to scroll underneath the spike balls or jump over them to avoid them. And the way the spike balls in that game scroll by is very similar to this game. And Super Turrican tried to do this effect too with the scrolling, but there wasn't enough parallax scrolling to support the effect, so everything just looked off, which made the platforming even harder. Yeah, but the train level in Mega Turrican is not as much of a pain in the ass as the other version, but it's still a pain in the ass because you have to jump over platforms and bottomless pits. Yeah, you see, I got way more leniency with these platforms than I ever did in the other game. Though I forgot to mention, in this game, when you approach these platforms from the sides, they will knock you back. I don't think they did that in Super Turrican, so there is a catch-22 to that. It's still easier to make your mark in this game, though.
Laser. Laser. Laser.
This music track is exclusive to the Genesis and the Amiga versions of Turrican 3, so yeah, you won't find this in Super Turrican. And it sounds weird in the Amiga version too, it's like really muffled. But anyway, we got a boss on the train. Where is this guy at in Super Turrican? Anyway, he is kind of hard when he's got the shield barrier up. Otherwise, he's really easy. You gotta destroy the shields, he'll spawn another shield, and he's just gonna keep doing that again and again until he runs out. His weakness point is his face, so you keep shooting him, eventually he'll run out of shield, and you can shoot his face freely. This boss fight is easier if you have bombs with you, because that way you can destroy all the shielding, but I don't have any bombs on me at the moment. Alright, it looks like he's out of shielding, so his desperation move is shooting fireballs. Ooh, that's really menacing. Ah! Should've kept the shielding up, buddy. Alright, here's the final part of Stage 4. And I forgot to mention this before, and they were in Super Turrican 2, or Super Turrican as well. You got these exit signs which will guide you to the end of the stage. They are a welcome addition. The earlier games, or at least Turrican 1, did not have these exit signs. I think Turrican 2, the final fight, did. The series is somewhat consistent. There are no real bad Turrican games for the most part, other than some of the conversions on maybe the Commodore 64 or Universal Soldier on the Sega Genesis. But otherwise, there are no real bad Turrican games. They're pretty solid for the most part. Unless if it's Universal Soldier. When I played it, I didn't even know that was supposed to be Turrican 2 until I actually looked it up. That was a weird one. I don't even remember watching the Universal Soldier movie at all. That was another movie tie-in game that really did not need to exist, especially if it's based on Turrican 2, because Turrican 2, the original version, was great. Universal Soldier is a poor man's conversion of Turrican 2, and it should die in a fire. All of the copies of Universal Soldier, the game, should be burnt or buried in New Mexico somewhere, because god damn, that was a nightmare. We got more of these flying tank enemies, and as long as there's a ceiling over them, they won't be able to fly that much because they're hindered by the ceiling. Or terrain in general. Solid objects just dampen their momentum. Oh, there's that Genesis twang sound effect. Wow! You gotta love that sound effect. Or hate it, I don't know. My mom usually hates that sound effect. I tend to agree, it can be ear-piercing in some occasions. But not here, I think it's used perfectly. Alright, destroy this tank enemy, and there's gonna be another long stretch with these mouth creatures I freaking hate because they shoot out a whole bunch of shit at you. I can't really shoot them back because they're angled at an awkward position. Come on, get them. Oh, critical failure. Oh, and I'm back here. Great. Oh no, it's not that far away, but I still have to deal with that mouth. The good thing is, whenever you die, you get 3 bombs back. So not too problematic. You still got these face huggers though, and this is the game where they make that annoying ear-piercing sound that I mentioned in the previous Super Turrican part. In the Super Nintendo version, the sound effect was a bit more subdued, but in this game, it was really high-pitched and super annoying to listen to. Anyway, here's the not-so-final boss of this game. Great. Now, the Queen Xenomorph is pretty much the same as it was in the Super Nintendo game, except it's got a spike on the end of its tail, so if you go too far to the left, you're going to get hit. But otherwise, it shoots bullets, it shoots snot bubbles, and it shoots that round ball thing. Use your Morph Ball, aka the wheel, in order to dodge all that shit. Now, this boss is still not that hard. Even though it's slightly harder than Super Turrican, it's not hard at all. So your feeling of disappointment is not going to be as severe. And the Queen takes a lot more bullets to kill in this version, I feel. There we go, the Queen's dead. Now on to the final level of the game. Alright, here we are, proof that Mega Turrican is actually finished. The final stage of the game. And this stage is a nightmare. Every conceivable robot enemy that appeared before makes a reappearance here. Including the flame spouting enemy. Wait, no, those were in Super Turrican. Okay, so that's their first appearance in this game, the flame spouting enemies that flow in the air. Be careful of these pistons, they are one-hit kills, because getting crushed by anything big results in instant death. And also, the soundtrack is incredible. This is actually my favorite song in the entire game. This stage is not that long if you take the quick way out and you're not really exploring much, but there are a couple bosses here, like this one. I think the boss's name here is Screwnut, if I'm not mistaken, I'm not really sure. But the boss is 2 turrets on a centrifuge, and it spins around. This boss is actually trickier than it looks. Sometimes both turrets will go in the same direction, and then one of the guns will switch directions to try and trip you up, and then the gun that's going in one direction will sometimes switch to another direction, and it's you gotta pay attention because, again, boss is trippy. And you also gotta be careful not to land on the turrets because that's a hitbox and you'll take damage. I was lucky enough for both turrets to go in the same direction as each other. Sometimes you get the turrets that are going in opposite directions for most of the fight. And I was lucky enough to take both of them down at the same time, too. Onward with the level. And I need health real soon. Oh, there we go. Oh, great, my weapons are demoted. Krah! That happens every time you die. Your weapons get decreased a level. Ah, I hate that robot. Ah, I hate that screw nut. Just get me up there. I think there's some goodies up here too, if I'm not mistaken. But the actual way through the level is down. Oh, great, I cannot get up there for some reason. Take 2, let me get my ass up there. Oh, the robot is back, damn it. Okay, one more time. Oh. Fuck it, I have 12 lives. I can make it through the entire game. Well, make that 11 lives. I still complete the game though. I wouldn't post this on YouTube if I didn't, unless if this was a gag run, or an April Fool's Day joke. I don't know what I'm doing for April Fool's Day, actually. I'll think of something and it's probably gonna tie into my next LP I'm thinking of. But that won't be until next week. Oh great, I got the rebound shot. The rebound shot in this game is not good for general usage. And here's the next mini-boss. I believe this guy is named General Walker, or no, Mr. Walker. I always remember this guy's name. Strangely enough, out of all the bosses in the Turrican series, Mr. Walker is the boss I recognize the most. Probably because his name is so simple. It's Mr. Walker. Mr. Walker. Anyway, here's the final stretch of Stage 5, and it's a long climb up. And it's kind of annoying to deal with because, as per usual with Turrican games, you cannot shoot upwards. So you have to jump and shoot like a maniac in order to deal with the enemies above you. Or just do the smart idea and use a smart bomb, which I don't have, because I keep using them. Just keep using your grapple hook and use the momentum in order to swing yourself up, which is easier said than done. Sometimes there will be enemies above you and you just swing yourself right into the enemy's arms. Or claws. Or sometimes stubs because they're robots. Okay, gotta watch out for the cannonballs and the conveyor belts and the fire-breathing robots. Oh good lord, why am I back down here? This stage, even though it's original to Mega Turrican, is kind of like stage 3-3 from Super Turrican, where you're on this snowy mountain and you have to climb a tree, and there's wind blowing. Even though there are no wind physics here and the timer is way more lenient, I feel like this stage is harder than the Super Turrican version because the enemy placement here is jacked. I hate it. Just enemies above you and you got these cannonballs everywhere. And you can't destroy the cannonballs or the turrets. You just gotta get lucky shots in when you can. Alright, the next boss is the penultimate boss, and it's the Terminator? Okay, it looks like we're fighting the Terminator, which is depicted in the style of Contra 3 The Alien Wars. If you played that game, you know what I'm talking about. But this boss is actually kind of challenging. He hits like a tank. Be careful of the claws. He will shoot out these white spotlights. I don't know what they are. They're supposed to be laser beams, but they don't really look like laser beams. But other than that, challenging boss, but he goes down quickly. Now here's the final boss. The Machine. He starts off with a gigantic laser beam, which actually looks like a laser beam this time, and he shoots out this thing. Two of them. Gotta be careful because they chase you around the room. They're heat-seeking. That's only phase 1 though. Phase 2 is a bit harder. Just gonna use the morph ball to cheat a little bit. Whenever you're in morphing ball mode, you are completely invincible, unless you get crushed up against something. But otherwise, you're completely invincible. Shit, dodge it. Oh, what hit me? God damn it. Alright, here's phase 2. The Machine in his final form does a couple of different things. He shoots out a green pulse beam that fires across the room straight. You can dodge it easily. And then he shoots out this grenade which bounces across the room. A bit harder to avoid, but if you're standing in the right place, you will avoid it. Ow, you cheating bitch. So yeah, sometimes he'll spawn right on top of you. This is pretty much futuristic Dracula in a nutshell. But yeah, that was Mega Turrican. A mega fun time. I love this game. I love this game a lot. And if you have modern consoles like the PS5 or the Switch, you can actually get all of the Turrican games for, I think it's $40, so not too cheap, but not too expensive, like the Battle Network collection. Oh my god, why did they make that collection so damn expensive?